Hello. Today we're gonna talk about taking care of yourself in the storytelling, advocacy, and activist work. I have actually been in these spaces for over a decade. I kind of hope that I have an idea of what I'm talking about. So here are my top ways of taking care of yourself in this line of work. First, avoid, dismantle, or never trust hierarchical power structures. What is a hierarchical power structure? It's a way to organize a system in which power is distributed in a pyramid, in which the top holds the most authority and power. These structures reproduce imbalances of power and enforce that imbalance through deception, coercion, and violence. If we were to recap the previous video, violence is what limits your chances of doing something. Having to work under a terrible boss just to avoid being evicted from your home is a form of coercion. An eviction is a threat of violence. These structures are everywhere. And why are they bad, you may ask? Well, power actually changes the human brain. Over time, it diminishes empathy. There are actually studies that provide solid evidence for that claim. A leader who lacks empathy is how a toxic environment starts to form. If you don't believe me, you can ask J.D. Vance, who may be our future vice president. Or better yet, ask the workers who allege nightmare conditions at the Kentucky startup that J.D. Vance helped fund. Hierarchical power structures also lead to nepotism and favoritism. This is what happens when appointments are based on a relationship. Don't believe me? Ask supremely inept son-in-law Jared Kushner, who did not bring peace to the Middle East, but did get $2 billion from the Saudi leaders through corruption. These hierarchical power structures always have a tendency towards oligarchy. Most people with power want to hold on to that power and want that power to increase. This is what leads to oligarchies and eventually monopolies. And if you don't believe me, you can ask the amazing Lina Khan, who is the chair of the Federal Trade Commission. Lina is hated by Wall Street, big tech, and big pharma. Why? Because she actually enforces antitrust laws, which are there to regulate the concentration of economic power and to prevent things like monopolies. So fat cats hate Lina. She may be among the best things Biden did in his administration, obviously with the genocide in Palestine at the very bottom of that list. We can only hope that Kamala wins and keeps Lina around, and hopefully do a weapons embargo. I'm not crazy. I know you can't go up to your boss tomorrow and tell them, let's make this organization a co-op. If you can't avoid hierarchical power structures, try this. Make sure that there are checks and balances on power, and that these are well enforced. Also, make sure that power changes hands as often as possible, that there are things like term limits. That way you can avoid the metastasizing of the brain rot of power in just one head. In the long run, this will be better for everybody. Also, never believe that those in power are better than you. You could be surprised of how flawed and incompetent people with power can be. Number 2, the second way of taking care of yourself in this line of work. Repeat after me. Mediocrity is okay. It's okay. Hypocrisy is not okay. Always reject the hustle, also known as the grind culture. Hustle or grind culture is all about working harder, longer, and more intensely, and to never feel satisfied. Hustle culture is racist, sexist, and ableist. Hustle or grind culture is a form of white supremacy. Let's provide an example. You're working for an organization or for an elected official that stands firmly for feminism and that work against racism, classism, and ableism. You are a woman of color with a working class background who fought hard for your education. Lots of your colleagues are white and or more affluent. On their grind or hustle culture, you are rewarded for working long and hard. But you live in the hood, in the projects, and that is far from the office. Your family has less generational wealth. Or you're not comfortable going home late at night. That gives your white, wealthy, male colleagues with apartments in the nice part of town, closer to the office, an unfair advantage over you. Or let's say your boss loves when folks work 11-hour days. But you can't. You have to go home to take care of your 5 younger siblings. The school where your parents met was in the poor side of town, and sexual education was really not good. And your family can't afford a babysitter. Once again, your wealthy male white colleagues have an advantage over you that is unfair, and they will be favored by your trash boss. Or let's say you live with dyslexia. It is harder for you to read. You have a unique and valuable perspective, but you may be a little slower to read and process some information. Your trash boss only cares about numbers. You're at this disadvantage. This is how hypocrisy exists in work environments that claim to fight against oppressive systems, while at the same time they reproduce the same systems in their own microcosm. Social justice leaders who buy into or who fail to challenge hustle culture may as well work on something different. In the long run, that may be better for society. Of course, how can we not talk about hypocrisy without talking about Phyllis Schlafly, the queen of anti-feminist hypocrisy? Phyllis advocated for traditional gender roles and for women to stay home with their kids and to make me a sandwich. Yet, Phyllis was always on the road, advocating, giving speeches, working, while some other people took care of her kids and of her husband. Don't be a Phyllis. Don't be a hypocrite. Of course, if we open the book of white hypocrisy, we will encounter the chapter about white saviorism, which is the belief that white people are here to save, help, teach, and protect people of color. The problem is that they do the work to pat themselves in the back, not to actually dismantle systemic oppression. If you suspect you may have white savior syndrome, ask yourself, are you really helping impacted people, or are you manipulating, exploiting, abusing, and harming the people that you claim to protect in the long term just to feel good about yourself? I know what some of you may be thinking. Luis, I really care. I'm a soldier, and this is a war. I wanna do lots of hard, honest work so we can win for our people. I feel you. I used to be like that too. Honestly, I am still like that sometimes. But let me say this. Do you want our ancestors in the labor movement to have fought for nothing? The ones who provided us with the weekends, with the 8-hour workday. You want them to look at us from the great beyond as we work ourselves to death. This fight is far from over. It's not gonna be over within our lifetimes. Take it easy. Do it for the ancestors. Make the ancestors proud. Don't make them proud. And this brings me to my third and last tip to take care of yourself in this line of work. Have something else in your life, unrelated or outside your activist circles. Something that brings you joy and perspective. Play a sport. Join a band, play a musical instrument, a social club. For God's sake, do some Quidditch. I'm not gonna judge you. If possible, do not neglect your family, even if they are conservative normies. Which reminds me, never let the people at work tell you that we are your family, that they are your family. That may sound nice, but it's toxic. At work, they chose you from a pool of candidates. Your actual family is stuck with you. I am sure that if my parents had like 5 different versions of me to pick from, to be their child, this version would have been rejected. They would have selected someone less radical, more traditional, and less crazy. Also, does that mean if the people at your work tell you you are my family, does that mean that if you leave the job or if you get fired, then they will stop being your family? That's not how family works. Also, if you're like me, you would do anything for family. And you may like your colleagues and your company, organization, but would you do anything for them? You shouldn't. Also, having something outside of your activist bubble is a really good way of avoiding groupthink. That's what happens when a team of members stop thinking independently and don't speak up and race towards consensus. This is actually a psychological phenomenon, which is to blame for some of the biggest failures in history. If you have connections outside of your bubble, you may think more clearly. And in the end, you may actually become better at adding people to your movement by knowing how to speak to normies, also known as people who are just not in that bubble and immersed in the knowledge that, you take for granted. Anyways, these are my top 3 ways of taking care of yourself while living, working in advocacy, activism, and storytelling spaces. I really hope this is helpful. Stay safe, stay strong, and I'll see you in the next one.